Kasubi Chiwanda, the National Vice Chairman of NRM, Buganda Region. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy. Good evening, viewers. Actually, the region is Central Region.
Central Region.
Central Region. It's Central Region because when it's Buganda, it includes Kampala. Kampala is different. So it is Central Region. I'm in charge of Central Region. That is Buganda except Kampala. Yes, the rest of the Buganda districts. Okay. Except Kampala.
It's good to have you, Honorable.
It's good to have you here to come here, Timothy. I love the studios. I love this is real progress.
You should be congratulating Honorable Chris.
Yeah, yeah, this is real progress. Steady progress.
I see the steady progress. He's also a national vice chairman for Kampala. He is Honorable Singh Katongole. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, Timothy. Good evening, viewers. Good evening, all our people.
So I didn't get the memo of the shots. I should have got one.
You have to be a vice chairperson.
So the NRM has been...
in Matthew chapter 7, verse 7, ask and it shall be given.
Fortunately, I put my plea. So we're going to be discussing the achievements, the challenges, what things have fallen short, what they are celebrating, but also we'll be seeing the justification of the NRM war then in 1985, where we got to here, but also understanding this thing that is thrown around, SEC. What is it all about? Honorable Chris, let me start with you, and let me start with generally because you're all dressed in similar shirts there. In 1980, the president and a group went into fighting an armed war. Give us a preamble of what it was between 1960 to 1980 that really led the president and these 27 to go into the bush.
Thank you very much, Timothy. Let me start by answering the first question, SEC. SEC stands for Central Executive Committee, which is an organ of the party, of NRM party, and it is comprised of the chairman, who is President Yoweri Museveni. There are two national vice chairpersons, Haji Moses Chigongo as first national vice chairperson, and Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga as the second vice chairperson, female. And then we have 6 regions, 6 NRM regions, and each region has a vice chairperson. I am the vice chair for Western region. Western region stretches from Karuma Bridge to Kisoro, that tip in Kisoro there, all of Western Uganda. Then you have Eastern region represented by Honorable Captain Mike Bukura. You have Central region represented by the Honorable Godfrey Kiwanda. You have Kampala represented by Honorable Singh Katongole. We have Karamoja, it's a region represented by Honorable Simon Arepe, he's not here. And then Northern region, it was represented by the late Right Honorable Jacob Olanyi. May his soul rest in peace, but he passed on. So those are 6. Then we have leagues, different leagues. Women's League, there is a chairperson. Workers' League, there is a chairperson. Persons with disability, there is a chairperson. The Youth League is the chairperson. So there are a number of leagues. So that small team is what constitutes the Central Executive Committee, which is a top organ of the party that processes most of the things which you see being done. So in a nutshell, that's the Central Executive Committee. Now let me come to your question. You know, Uganda spent about 70 years under colonial rule. We were colonized like many of the countries in the developing world, colonized by the British. And you know, we have just been having the NRM summit, the non-aligned movement. And I have been explaining to the media that one of the projects that NRM spearheaded was to push for decolonization, to fight for countries to become independent and gain sovereignty. And that's why NRM still exists. It still pushes for respect for sovereignty of different countries. So Uganda attained independence in 1962. Independence meant that the Bazungu, the colonialists, the whites have gone, and then we shall govern ourselves as blacks, as Ugandans. Now, the independence project in many of the countries in Africa especially went bad, because the first country to get independence was Ghana in 1957, and then there was a wave of countries getting independent. But the experience was not the best, what happened after independence. Because the colonialists, when they left, they didn't leave wholly. Because they left unwillingly, they were pushed out. They never said we are going in peace. So there was a neo-colonial hand still hovering over most of the countries. That's why you will see there were many assassinations, there were many coups and destabilization across African countries. In some of the countries like those which were colonized by France, you still see coups, and when you put a microscope, you see the colonial master still hovering and influencing what is happening. Now, in Uganda, the adults, the majority of the people who are old know what we went through. From 62 onwards, we had a lot of instability in the country. I usually tell my audience that from 1962 to 1986, those were 24 years. But in 24 years, we had about 10 presidents. But we had elections only once, in December 1980. Yes, we had elections in April 1962 that ushered in the independence leadership, because independence was in October. But from that October 62 to 86, when NRM came, we had elections only once, December 1980. But we had about 10 presidents. There is even a time when we had 3 people making a presidency. Uganda, 5. The Honorable Dr. Mike Mukura is reminding me, 5. Imagine where you have a situation where one person can't be a president, you must bring a number of people to make a president. That means the country had failed. Now, in 1980, to cut the story short, when there were those elections, President Yoweri Museveni was one of the candidates, and he had formed UPM, Uganda Patriotic Movement. And he had been studying and observing the dynamics and the situation in Uganda, and he warned, I was younger but old enough to monitor and observe, that if Uganda remains the way it is with this chaos, that I will go to the bush, wage a war, and start a new chapter, which indeed he did with his friends. Because one of the problems which we had is that when the colonialists left, we started on a wrong footing. We went into multipartyism. We formed political parties, but unfortunately, they were inclined along religion, tribe, and so forth. For instance, in my area, Chigezi, those days, UPC meant being Anglican. DP meant being a Catholic. In Uganda here, the region Honorable Kiwanda represents, and the Honorable Sinka Tongo, the central, there was Kabaka Yeka, which was basically for Baganda, for those who believed in the Kabaka. That was part of the problem. So there was social disruption, despotic leadership, and the collapse of the state. And that's what forced General Yoweri Museveni and his colleagues to go to the bush and fought a war for 5 years, from 1981 to 1986. We actually say that NRM came as a result of blood, tears, and sweat, because President Yoweri Museveni and his colleagues had to fight a liberation war to restore order. And then 1986, they assumed leadership and started a new chapter. It's very important, especially for our viewers, especially the younger generation, because many of them, they have only seen NRM, and they do not appreciate where we are coming from. So in 1986, when NRM assumed the power, I usually summarize the situation, being a medical doctor, like Uganda was like a patient who is subconscious, surviving on oxygen and steroids. And that will explain that the major work of NRM government in the beginning was to do what we call resuscitation. Like when they bring a patient who is in a coma and is breathing, you first bring that patient back to life, and then you investigate what is the cause of this bleeding. So Uganda, by the time NRM took power, it was like a patient who is unconscious on oxygen and is surviving on steroids, and that's where NRM found the country. So I hope that gives you the background as to why General Museveni and his colleagues had to go to the bush to fight to restore a new order, which we want to explain what has happened in the last 38 years when NRM came into power.
And I'm glad you've explained that, because it's very important that the generations that come after appreciate exactly where the country has come from and where it is right now. Honorable Dr. Mike Mukula, you're very welcome, the National Vice Chairman for the Eastern Region. I will give you a moment to breathe, and I first get Honorable Chiwanda here. Honorable, with the synopsis that we have received from Honorable Baryomunsi on where the country came from, a patient on steroids, but still in ICU. At 38 years, where is Uganda?
Thank you so much, Timothy. Of course, I'll begin from where my brother Chris has stopped, when we see President Museveni taking on arms to go to the bush and liberate and bring order to the country. That is, by 1986, I was in P4 when President Museveni and the team liberated, and that is when we are counting the 38 years from 1986. Of course, as you are restating, as you are bringing life back, there are very many things that you do. Of course, he has talked as a medical doctor, but now all of us have ever taken our patients to the hospital. We know actually what really takes place. First of all, you cannot give somebody who is just regaining from regaining to life to begin with posho or to begin with matoke. There are very many things that you should begin with really for this person to come back to life. And that's what actually the country has done. Of course, as the national resistance movement, when national resistance movement was coming, we came with a 10 points program. Of course, later this was reduced to the 4 core principles. It came to the 4 core principles just to make sure that at least every Ugandan can actually be able to interpret what NRM stands for. That's how we came with the nationalism, because we believed that now if we are to have the right prescription for this patient called Uganda, we must get the right drug for this person, and one of it has been tribalism. If the religion and our political parties were begun on based on religion, based on tribe, then one of the things that we needed to preach first was nationalism, the love for the country, how we are together, irrespective of our tribes, irrespective of our region. That is the first prescription. Number 2 is, of course, we knew now that another thing that actually had brought in and poverty and limited thinking was just because people were so think about their tribe, their small things. Then we say no, we must think more as Africans, and that's why we came up with core principle number 2, which is Pan-Africanism. Of course, now yesterday I was discussing on the media, and when I saw the president now assuming to be the chairperson of NRM, now the chairperson of G77. So it's actually now enlarging from the Pan-Africanism that we thought about to another level, to the international level. But that is the second prescription that we actually thought as the national resistance movement. Number 3 is the socio-economic transformation. Of course, this country, every resource, every infrastructure had gone down. So we had to look at the infrastructure development, in terms of hospitals, in terms of roads, in terms of different infrastructures, national parks, everything has gone to shambles. And we had to bring order. That is including the socio-economic transformation. That is economic growth and economic development. So we had to go to those ones and see how do we actually address the issues of economic growth, how do we address the issues of economic development. Now, number 4, which is also very important, and we thought that actually that was the reason why President Museveni was the bush, is democracy. We returned the people, the authority, the power to the people to decide. So that's why we went for constitutional writing in the CA, we did all this. So we're following the 4 core principles. That is nationalism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, and democracy. And out of all this is where we're coming up with different programs, Timothy. When you see us coming up with, when we began with the Luwero Triangle, when we had issues to do with the Karamoja, the development agency, things like Ntandikwa, we are all into our theme of the socio-economic transformation. And definitely, what we've been saying, our participation in the liberation of our brothers, neighbors, when you see us in Rwanda, when you see NRA in DRC, when you see NRA in South Sudan, we are following on to our core principle of the Pan-Africanism. And of course, the 4 have worked. The 4 core principles, the prescription that we did for these ones, to me, they've actually worked. Of course, we may not have reached at the apex of everything, but as the national vice chairman and also as a son of this revolution, I still see that actually what the prescription that we did has actually worked on this patient. The patient may not have but he has recovered, but he may not, and now we are now reaching at the takeoff. I believe that we are reaching at the takeoff. When you see us now reviving the Uganda Airlines, we are going to we are now exploring our oil. You are seeing getting a professional army. We are seeing getting having an election almost 6 times, and you are winning with more than 50%. Our constitution is very clear that you cannot only be president unless when you've got 50 plus 1%. And nobody has ever done it in Uganda. Whereas the Honorable Chris was saying that there was a time when they would group people together to make a presidency or to make somebody be president. Now, National Resistance Movement, who is the flagship of General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, we make him as our candidate. He wins with 70%, 75%, 69%. I think the worst that we ever won with is 59%. But still, that is a proof that actually people can think beyond their tribes, because no single tribe in Uganda that has 50%, no single religion in Uganda that has more than 50%. So the fact that a one party can get more than 50% and people elect people you see from Arua, from Soroti, from Karamoja, from Kisoro, agreeing to vote for a single party, that actually has moved us and has made us that yes, now Ugandan can also think as a unit. So to me, we've actually moved these 38 years, and the prescription that we made was the right prescription for this country.
So is the patient still in hospital or they're home?
No, the patient is home. The patient is home. He's no longer a patient. He's now actually a grown-up person. If he was a child by then, he has grown up now to 38 years. And we've reached the takeoff stage, as I've mentioned, and we believe. And now, the things that we're talking about is bringing, of course, more luxuries. How do we do this? How do we make sure that everyone has 4 meals? How do we make sure that everyone has household income? How do we make sure that everyone can afford medical? How do we make sure that everyone can afford a university degree? So that's where we are now. And that's why most of our programs, Timothy, now are targeting now household income, health for all this. We are no longer into the recovery program, but now we are onto the takeoff stage.
The patient now is at the home. no longer patient, just go to the health club to do gym. To
Honorable Singh, let me come to you. One of the things that both Honorable Chris and Honorable Sui have talked about is the division that was in the country, based on religion, based on tribe. 38 years down the road, do you see that harmony and reconciliation, and at what percentage are we as a country?
Definitely. Thank you, Timothy. Like both my colleagues have said, Uganda was from day one of independence, formed on a staircase of division. The political parties were tribalistic, religion, and NRM, President Museveni, when he went to the bush, I think he looked at the core problems of Uganda. That is why when he won in 1986, he first tried to see how do we solve that division. That is why if you see from 86 to 96, President Museveni ruled. That was the first stage in hospital, where you're in plasters, everything, you have to treat the wounds. Then he saw at least there's an improvement on the patient, and went to 96 where we said, yes, we opened the political space, let's go have democracy. And we went to elections. 1996 was the first election, but still we're curing the divisionism. And we said, let everybody stand on their individual merit. That's why the elections of 96 were purely everybody on his strength. President Museveni came on his strength, the Semogareres came on their strength. There's no political party, because all our political parties had sentiments of different thought. From 96 to 2006, that was the second treatment of trying to unite Ugandans and teaching them politics of tribalism, politics of division does not work. And when President Museveni and the team saw, yes, Ugandans now can know how to go into politics and not remain divided into petty things of religion, tribalism, we moved and opened the political space for political parties. 2005, we allowed the political parties, and that is where NRM, the party, was formed. And we have been in politics of multi-party for since 2005 up to now. And we have seen so many parties grow, so many new parties come, and people, most parties are supported throughout the country.
Do you feel the country is reconciled and harmonious as it is now?
Definitely we are much better. We are almost at 75. There may be a few people still with a few little thoughts. That may be there. We may not, you see, like we said, out of the theater, we have tried to do everything. But you find 80% we have treated. But a few with old thought, you cannot eliminate them. So those may be there. And I know why you're asking that question is what happened in the last election in Buganda region, the wave. Maybe part of that old thought. But definitely the rest of the part of the country is very ready for open politics without the division.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mukula, for you, it's normally the, excuse me, the economics. Where is our economy now? Where was it in 85?
Let's look at it this way. By the year 1986, the National Resistance Movement under General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni inherited a collapsed nation.
Yes.
Let's start it from there. The inflation was at a negative, to be exact, if you want to look at negative 187. If you look at the road infrastructure, totally collapsed, and so on and so forth. The Uganda shilling had literally lost value, and in terms of foreign reserves, the country had almost no reserves. In 1987, General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, under the National Resistance Movement, went into what we call economic reforms. And that's where the devaluation of the shilling by 30%. It went into structural adjustment programs. We went into a rapid, what you call, economic recovery program. And you will see that we went into programs or policies which were meant to reverse the negative growth of the economy. But the most important thing you want to note was that in terms of the economic development of this country, you could not do anything without addressing security, because infrastructure number one in any nation is peace and stability. And all countries that have been stable have grown. And the national resistance movement went in to address counter-reactive forces, the counter-revolutionary forces. And that's why you find that by the year 1986-87, to date, that is 8 years after, the national resistance movement as a political organization, as a political party, has been able to fight 14 major groups in the country. Number one was, for example, FOBA, which was at the border with Kenya and Uganda, under force of Wotebak, led by the late Comrade Agra Wari, who was defeated. You remember he was fighting, he killed many of our LCs in Busia, Malaba, and Wakaka. Then in the West Nile, you had the group led by Colonel Juma Oris the late, which was West Nile Bank Front Part 1 and 2. That group was defeated. You had in the same axis a group of UNLA led by Major General Ali Bamuze, Uganda Rescue Front Part 1 and 2. In the Acholi sub-region, if you do recall, you had the father of Alice Lakwena, who took up arms, who was defeated. You had a group of Michelangelo, who was defeated. You had a group of Alice Lakwena, the group that fought all the way through Lango, Teso, Palisa, Busoga, where we are going to be tomorrow. She was defeated in the axis of just before you get to Kakira, and she crossed over to Kenya, into exile. That was the Holy Spirit movement. You also had a group in Teso, led by the late Peter Tai, the UPA. The force fought for 7 years in Teso. That group was also defeated. You also recall that the national resistance movement inside here, Uganda, there was a group of a man called Major Itongwa, Chirimutu. He was defeated. Then you remember the guy who was, the man who was in Kasese, the former minister of Milton Obote,
Bazira.
Amon Bazira, the NALU, National Army for the Liberation of Uganda, which eventually joined with the current team that we are fighting, the forces, the reactionary forces, the moribund forces, who are in the DRC Congo of ADF. They became the Allied, and that's why they formed what you call the Allied Democratic Forces. And in the north, you had a group of a man called leading the group of Lord's Resistance Army, Kony. For 23 years, Kony fought government of Uganda. And I want to tell you, from 2003, when he attacked the axis of Teso, where Kiwanda was, General Yoweri Museveni and the gallant forces of UPDF drove those moribund forces to 2,000 kilometers into Central African Republic, never to come back again. Uganda now, as I talk, is peaceful from the north to the south, east to the west. And I want to tell you, in terms of the economic achievements and growth of this country, the national resistance movement, which inherited a road infrastructure. I see people planting
banana plantations.
By the year 1986, the national resistance movement had only 1,358 kilometers of tarmac ever since Adam and Eve left Eden in Uganda. Today we are over and above 6,000 kilometers of tarmac. That is the road infrastructure. If you look at all these 14 urban centers, the cities that, and some of the cities that we have in the country, you will see that most of them are tarmac. If you look at Gulu now, you went to Mbarara, you went to Kabale, you went to Hoima, you went to areas like Arua, you went to Mbale, Soroti, Jinja. The roads are excellent, and those who are watching us know that the road infrastructure there is excellent. You can now move by road from Malaba all the way through Jinja, through Iganga, to Kampala, and head to Gatuna, the border with Rwanda, and it's tarmacked. You can move from Kampala via Mbarara and head towards the areas of Kasese into Pondwe in the west. It is tarmacked. You can move from Kampala through Karuma and move through the Nebi all the way to west to Arua to Oraba. It is tarmacked. You can move from the border, from the area of Malaba, Tororo, areas of Mbale, Soroti, through Dokolo, to Lira, Konakamdini, to Gulu, all the way to Nimule, the border with Sudan, is tarmacked.
Honorable, and I'm glad you're talking about the tarmac there. Fortunately, you and I come from the east. You understand Busia going upwards, Soroti coming down here. You talk about someone moving across east, west of the country.
Yes.
What other thing moves on those roads? Is the infrastructure getting us the production and the economy that we are yearning for as a country?
The national resistance movement has zoned this country into 18 production zones. For example, in the East Teso, where I come from, that's a fruit processing zone. If you looked at Elgon, near where you come from, the Elgon area, that's where you have coffee, Arabica. You have coffee, and the production is high level. They produce bananas, and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of capacity, in terms of agriculture in this country, that's what you're talking about. Uganda has got 48% of East Africa's arable land. And our comparative advantage is in agriculture. And that's where our people who want to see the revolution really being understood in its context. Let me tell you one thing. And this is where the narrative is. In the beginning, we didn't have almost capacity to produce. But now, under the reforms that the national resistance movement has been able to put in place, we now have excess milk, and we have the value addition chains that are being moved on these roads. And that's why you note that road infrastructure is something that must be determined by the financier before you finance the road to see the usage of that road. We have capacity to produce excess milk, excess beans, excess maize. We have now excess capacity in terms of sugar. If you recall, by the time, at one time when the late Nyerere, the late Moi was in power, he donated bags of sugar to Ugandans across in Busia. Now Uganda is exporting much more. We have excess sugar in the country. The point I'm trying to tell you, that even in the terms of balance of trade for us who are at the border areas, eastern Uganda, you can see that before the national resistance movement took over power, the trade balance between Uganda and Kenya was almost $640 million in favor of Kenya. But the reverse now is in play. And the narrative here is that Uganda now exports more to Kenya, and we have the capacity to produce more for Kenya. We are now the food basket of East and Central Africa. This has been the achievement that has been anchored in by the national resistance movement. You no longer see Uganda, which is starving. You have now excess in most parts of the country. And that's why I want to tell you that in terms of inflation, for example, we are now a nation which is at about 2.5% in terms of inflation in the country, coming to 3%. One of the lowest in the world. If you look at the neighboring countries, inflation is quite high. In Kenya, it's about 8%. If you look at the stability of the shilling, Uganda shilling has been enjoying stability at about between 3.7 to 3.8, 3,800 in exchange to the dollar, meaning that our stability, our fiscal policy, our macroeconomic stability is stable. If you look at the other aspects of power, by 1986, when General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni took over power, our capacity in Owen Falls Dam was 62 megawatts. Only 2 generators out of 4 were working. What am I telling you? And what are the leaders? What do our people need to know? From 62 megawatts now, by 1986, we are now heading towards when we have the Karuma Dam, when will be launched later this year. We will be close to 2,000 megawatts from 62 megawatts in 1986. What does that mean? It means that we now have power stability. There is no nation in the world that can grow without adequate and enough power capacity in our nation.
Okay.
NRM has built 5 major dams, including major other micro dams, and alternative power sources, which is clean energy. So in terms of the economy, Uganda now is among the 10 fastest growing economies in the world. No wonder we can now host NRM, we can now host the G77 plus China, because our country is now attractive. It is also a strong destination for foreign direct investments. And in terms of peace and stability, it's a stable and solid nation because of the governance we have.
Thank you, Honorable Mike Nkura. Honorable Chris, let's get back to, you gave a very good synopsis, and the input here was good to back up the justification for the war then. But there's a missing link between the Generation Z, Generation X, to the gentlemen that are seated here. It's a good story, it's good history, it's good to listen to. How do you bridge the gap between that youthful generation, that is a big percentage of our population, and to get and appreciate where our country is coming from and where you're taking it?
Yes, actually, when I was explaining what SEC is, that we also have a youth league, and the chairperson of the youth league in the country is also a member of the Central Executive Committee. And you realize that the reforms which were championed by NRM actually put inclusion and participation at the center of whatever we have done. It is the NRM government that deliberately made laws and policies to ensure that the youth are part and parcel of governance and all the programs that we do. The women were brought at the forefront. When you see women in the parliament with the representation of districts and the councils, with a directive in the constitution that 40% or 30% must be women of these governance structures. This was a deliberate decision by NRM. Persons with disability and all the special interest groups, the older persons being in the parliament. So NRM has championed the case of inclusion, and we're aware that given our demographics, the majority of Ugandans are young people, because Uganda is a young country. Yes, there may be no youth here, but we have youth, and youth are central to the running of NRM as a party. To that end, when we do the planning, the budgeting, the programming, we have to make sure that we dedicate resources to the advancement of the welfare of young people in this country. Honorable Kiwanda took us through the 4 ideological pillars of NRM, ranging from patriotism, stroke nationalism, Pan-Africanism, socio-economic transformation, democracy, and the youth play a central role in all these. Let's look at the aspects of socio-economic transformation which Honorable Mike has elaborated. We've done many things: health, education, road infrastructure, safe water. You look back in 1986-87 when the NRM came into power. The population of Uganda was 14 million Ugandans. Now we boast of about 46 million Ugandans. We shall be doing a national housing and population census in May. The census night will be 9th of May to get the exact number of Ugandans or people who live in Uganda. But first, as we say, majority are young people. Now, it means under the NRM government, the population has increased by more than 3 times. And the question is why? When you look at some of the initial programs which the president championed at the beginning of his phase of leadership, 1, immunization. We invested resources and a lot of energies in ensuring that all children in Uganda get immunized. And that partly explains the population explosion, if I can call it for lack of a better word, the huge numbers of young people, because pre-1986, these preventable diseases, the 6 killer diseases, were the ones, initially 8, were the ones which were killing our young people. We usually measure that through what we call infant mortality rate and under 5 child mortality rate. The rates were 3-digit. The rates were very high. But over time, because of the focused interventions, this indicator has come down, meaning fewer and fewer children now die before celebrating their 1st birthday or before their 5th birthday. They survive into adulthood, and that's why the population has increased. Of course, you are affected.
Sorry to intervene here, comrade. I want you to note, and for the viewers, to underscore some of the achievements the national resistance movement has anchored in. 1 is that Uganda now is the youngest nation in the world. Our fertility growth, our fertility is about 6.3%, meaning every woman is estimated to produce between 6 to 7 children. And that means, if you translate that to fertility, we are growing at 3.2% per annum. That's a huge population growth. If you go into demographics, the figures, we are producing an average of nearly 5,000 children per day. If you translate that to approximately a month, we are producing nearly 150,000 children a month. If you translate that to a year, we are producing nearly 1.8 million children every year. What does that mean? If you look at the latest figures of UBOS, the figures between 0 to 4 give you nearly 7.9 million children, meaning that children between the age of 0 to 4 is 7 million children. No wonder what Honorable Baryomunsi comrade is saying. If you look at it very analytically, our population now, 80% of our population is below the age of 30 years. 55% of our population is below the age of 16 years. If you look at it effectively, a half of our population, more than half of our population, is consumptive, dependent, and does not contribute a shilling to the economy. And that means that you have an inverted pyramid. All this has been possible because of what Honorable Comrade Ramos has been able to talk about. This revolution has now made it possible for you to have a population that is young, energetic, aggressive, but also look at it this way. Their contribution to the economy is very low. In terms of the economics, less than 3 million Ugandans are in the radar of Uganda Revenue Authority, meaning that out of the 46 million Ugandans, 43 million Ugandans depend on the 3 million. And if you look at in terms of production and capacity in terms of a generation, this projected over time is a growing population, and by the year 2030, our population will be nearly 50 million Ugandans. By the year 2050, our population will have hit a figure of close to 120 million people. This has been possible because of what Honorable Rimonsi has been talking about. Over to you.
So thank you for the expanded information, which is very elaborate. Now, so what am I saying? We are saying the youth, the young people seeing us out there, and I have made this point several on many occasions, that we have big numbers of the youth, courtesy of, yes, the high fertility Honorable Mukula is talking about, but also because of the investment in child survival programs by the NRM government. And that is why, for instance, the government introduced UPE, Universal Primary Education, Universal Secondary Education. That's why when NRM came, we only had Makerere University, but we have since expanded. Now we have 53 licensed universities, both public and private, and many other programs. And the huge segment of the population being young people is both an advantage but also a challenge. Now what we are doing as a government, as the NRM government, is to invest in these young people in order to harness the demographic dividend, to turn these young people into an asset for the country rather than a burden. That explains why, for instance, the president has been insistent that we should invest in science and technology. We reorient the education to give skills, to give competences, to make sure that our young people have technology skills in order for them to be innovative, in order for them to create employment. One of the challenges that we have today is that we have an educated population. These young people are educated because we have universities and tertiary institutions, but we have to create jobs and employment opportunities for them. That explains the core you have always had the government saying that let us add value to our resources. Let us attract investors. Let us deal in trade. Let's look for markets for our exports so that we can create employment. When I was appointed Minister for ICT, the President asked me, use ICT to create jobs for our young people. There's what we call BPO, business process outsourcing, which can be in the country but also offshore. And we're now exploring markets where you can get jobs outside the country, and the young people are employed, but they are physically in Uganda and they are employed in America, in Europe. The other day I had a discussion with the Minister of ICT of the Philippines. We are signing an MOU to work with them and the communities in the Western world to get these jobs. So youth remain a core group that NRM looks at as an asset for this country. And we continue to invest in the population, but also with the focus. Like now we talk of the parish development model, which is a flagship program that we've been championing as government, as NRM, to ensure that we have wealth creation, because we have invested in infrastructure and many of these aspects. Now, what we are on now as NRM is to create wealth, is to make sure that every Ugandan has income. And we are now sending money through the financial inclusion pillar of PDM to every parish, where the parishes have been mobilized to make circles. Every year we send 100 million shillings to a parish circle, and we have instructed that of the 100 million, that comes to the parish, 20% is dedicated to young people, the youth. So out of the 100 million, the 20 million goes to the youth, so that the young people, particularly those who are out of school, can engage in profitable enterprises for them to be part of the money economy.
Okay. Thank you very much. Honorable Chiwanda, let me come to you. What are the shortcomings of the NRM and what are you doing about them?
Shortcomings, if any.
Yeah, but he has ended on a very, very interesting point.
Yes.
When he's talking about now about the young people and the Timothy, we want to, so because that's where we have a very big challenge as the national resistance movement. First of all, the young people out there at times tend to think that, okay, the national resistance movement has done all this, but we seem to be excluded, probably like that. Of course, all of us have ever been young. I told you when the national resistance movement took power here, I was young, I was in P4. But this national resistance movement created an avenue where I could join in. At 23, I was in member of parliament for my constituency in Mitiana North. Because I was a youth leader, like any of the young people are now doing. Most of them are in our youth leagues, others in youth councils, others in women councils, as young as they are. And actually, very many young people have progressed from those positions and have actually rose to national positions. But besides that, not everyone is going to be in leadership. The national resistance movement now is concentrating at actually the four categories of how do we create wealth. Because now the focus of this year, of this manifesto has been on wealth creation. When we talk about, Honorable Chris Baromis has talked about the ICT, but we're also putting a special emphasis on commercial agriculture. And that is, this is irrespective of the young or the old, but how do we engage into commercial agriculture? So that's when that's why we are bringing these programs, the yoga programs, the PDM, especially PDM, because PDM is basically on agriculture. And Timothy, if you look at our strategy onto this, if you go down to the grassroots, you will see very many young people getting involved into this. Getting involved in actually now if you go to most of these parishes, you see them having agro input shops. Our program on rural rectification have actually helped the young people to set up businesses in the villages, services, restaurants, saloons. It's because of the rural rectification program. Personally, when I was growing up, we had power on only 2 villages. One was called Bukala Muli at a parish, another one at Chikandwa sub-county headquarters. And that is in my sub-county where I'm born, that is Chikandwa. But if I increase it to the whole constituency, we had like 4 villages. But today, over 120 villages are covered with power. So the young people actually can create their own jobs.
And but Honorable Chiwanda,
yes,
does the NRM have challenges?
Yes,
because you're giving me what Honorable Chris has given me. Yes. But I want to know if it has challenges, because everything sounds very rosy. We're looking for the thorns.
We do have challenges. We do have challenges because as we do all this, definitely that people are fighting from within, but also the mindset, because we're also faced with a very big problem of mindset. Honorable Chris Baromis, his ministry is in charge of the mindset. How do we change? How do people really believe that actually I can make it? It's very key. And another one is, of course, corruption. Corruption. We are faced also with some issues of corruption, where some people want to take everything and actually leave nothing for the population to grow. Especially among the civil service, politicians don't handle money. But actually, our civil service system, we of course we are also faced with some other challenges like the international politics, the regional politics. Last time when the president was addressing, he was actually talking about the ADF. ADF, when you see ADF operating in DRC, and we are using resources of Ugandans to stabilize. That is, resources being taken here. Probably these resources would have been used for the development of the country. So all these are challenges here and there. But above all, these 38 years, Timothy, these are years of actual progress. We've actually achieved a lot of progress as a country. Of course, the bottlenecks have been here and there. When we were in Karamoja, I was working in Karamoja as a resident list commissioner when I was 27 years. I was there for 5 years. But we had an issue of the disarmament. This was a very big challenge. And this was faced by the national resistance movement. We had to fight it. Of course, even today, even up to today, we still have thefts in Karamoja, cattle thefts. Even the streets of Kampala, you see, if somebody is moving with a phone, somebody touches it, takes it. Yes, and all these, you know, we cannot say that we're in heaven. We cannot say that. We cannot say that. So we are not portraying a picture that this is like a heaven, but we are saying that compared for where we came from, where we are heading to a very, very bright future.
Thank you very much. Honorable Singh, let's talk about the region. Some of the things that the NRM did is pacification of Sudan. We're talking about Rwanda. We're talking about ANC in South Africa in '94 there. But the region seems to be on tenterhooks and falling apart. When you look about the news today, Rwanda, Burundi is at stake. DRC is at stake. Sudan is at stake. Has the NRM really lost the mandate in what it's talking about in one of its pillars as a Pan-Africanism?
Now, NRM and our President Years Of Nrm is trying very hard to unite the region. You've seen him in Somalia. He has been a kingpin in Kenya. Burundi, he's tried. But sometimes the internal politics of some of these states overstress our interests or our plans to bring cohesion to the region. So, as NRM, we have tried very hard to see that, because it's the President's dream that we have the East African community and a bigger market for our people, a bigger vision for the East Africans. But what is failing us is maybe the internal politics. Like at the beginning, my comrade William said that the colonialist hands are still hovering over us. And the colonists are not happy in Africa uniting. So they try to penetrate as much as possible to see that we don't unite. They know once Africa can unite, we are not stoppable. We have everything, we have all the resources. We have with the food basket of the world of tomorrow. We have everything. So for them to benefit, they have to see that we don't unite. Gaddafi was killed because of he was trying to make a united Africa. He wanted to stop the use of the dollar to purchase oil. They saw that as a threat. So Africans, we need to, African leaders and Africans in general, we really need to really think hard that yes, what is our vision? Do we want to cross Europe? And we have the capacity to beat Europe, beat some of these countries. Look at India and China, where were they? We really fought, the Indians, Chinese really fought that the colonists should not interfere in their local interests. And they've gone far. India, China are in the top 5 today. So Africa and African leaders really need to start thinking that way. Stop the interference of the European powers. It's NRM, our president, who openly tells he's one of the presidents who has the courage to tell off the whites, here you're wrong, don't interfere in ours. You don't know our internal politics. And that's the truth. They don't know our problems. They don't know how we have passed through the last 50, 60 years from independence. They left us Uganda was a country, we had only one factory of soda, for example. There were no production in Uganda. Definitely we had to rely on foreign powers. But today we have everything. Even if the foreign powers say we're stopping, yes, we are capable. We may still be dependent on them, but it's not a very long run. If our population, today, when Mike said, only 3 million people are in the radar of URA. Just imagine if we have 50% of the 46 million population, do we need to rely on anybody? No. So all our neighboring states need to build capacity and need to challenge the foreign powers that we can manage our own issues, and we'll have peace in the region.
Thank you very much. My last questions will go to Honorable Mike Mukula, then I'll give you parting shots. Honorable, you mentioned very good, very rosy statistics. Let's throw statistics there. About 40,000 young people leave universities every year. Come January 27th, they'll be leaving Makerere and all tertiary institutions. 9,000 jobs are available in this country. What is the NRM going to do to ensure that young people get placement or they're given a hand up to start work or be entrepreneurs?
That's a key point. We have the 4 or 5 major challenges that we would like as the national resistance movement to address, because as you note, we have tackled some of the most difficult and intricate human challenges that we inherited as a revolutionary government. That failed all the other governments and the other presidents that Honorable Baryomunsi talked about. Stability of a country. If a country is not held together, then you cannot have and tackle the challenges that a nation faces. That's why I want to tell you that the 38 years of power of the national resistance movement has manifested into a number of achievements, but also leaves the country with challenges like youth unemployment, like poverty, when you tackle issues like ignorance, when you tackle issues like corruption, service delivery. These are all factors that are playing in the political dynamic. And I want you to understand very clearly, one very important thing. When we produce 5,000 children every day, you do not expect, and you should be able to match this with equal numbers of doctors, equal number of nurses, equal numbers of judges, teachers, classrooms, hospitals, and so on and so forth. There is an assumption and a perception with expectation to think that we are a fully developed nation, that we are like what United States or UK is. By the way, all these mature states like United States with over 250 years of independence face almost the same thing of service delivery like we do. But the point that I would like you to note, especially for the young people, is that when you talk about the fundamentals, you have demographic gains. And how do I address the needs of these demographics, the youth, the output, to deal with the poverty reduction? You have a family, a man who has little income, but has got 4 wives. He has got 1 acre or 2 acres of land. He does not have capacity to produce, but continues to produce more children. And when he produces these children, government has put into place a means to try to help him. And that's why you have universal primary education. You have universal secondary education. You have universal medical care. You have all this parish development model, which is supposed to address factors of production, operation wealth creation. You have got so many programs that are being initiated by government to help the youth. You have the youth entrepreneur program. You have the women program, which is on. You have the youth skilling polytechnics, which are being developed in the country. All these are meant to mitigate and address the challenges the youth face on the ground. The point is that this is not like Genesis chapter 1, where it was in the Bible, let there be and it was. It's a process.
Okay.
And it takes us a process, it takes us planning, a resource envelope to address all these challenges I've talked about, to elucidate even further, and for you to understand the narrative. It is important for you to note that the sub-Saharan region is now faced almost with the same challenges that we face. But look at it this way. The expansion of the East African community, and this is when you look at the long-range solution, to have a common market, intra-Africa trade. You talked about Africa having challenges in terms of what you call bilateral conflicts. Those will be de-escalated, and that's why you have the authorities like IGAD. You have authorities like the East African Community. You have a much bigger organization like the African Union. The point that you want to look at is that how do we now address these challenges without looking at it as a nation only as Uganda? We must now have a sister nation assembly where we can have a solution in order to provide African solutions to the African problems. And they seem to be common. And that's why I want to tell you that there is no government, there is no political party, there is no political organization in this country which is tested in terms of leadership like General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. The confidence which is global, as you note, NRM is the second largest body after the UN General Assembly, which assembled in Uganda. That is a vote of confidence in Uganda. The G77 plus China is a vote of confidence in Uganda and the leadership of General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. Secondly, I also want you to note that Uganda to have put together and to be focused on economic growth among the 10 fastest growing economies out of 192 countries in the world, and Uganda is clustered to be among the 10 fastest growing economies, shows you that the parameters, the matrix of our social economic growth, the analysis as it were, is being answered and being addressed despite our bigger resources.
Okay. Thank you. Gentlemen, unfortunately I've run out of time, so I'll start with Honorable Barrio Munsi, Honorable Subi, Honorable Singh, and finally I'll end with Honorable Mike. Your parting shots, but also on the future of the NRM.
Yes. The future of the NRM, and the future is NRM. Ugandan is watching us out there. Either it is the NRM that holds the future for all of us, and the future is very bright. Like we have debated in this show, NRM inherited a collapsed state which has now recovered, and we are on an upward trajectory in terms of transformation. And there are ways in which we measure whether there is progress or not, because it's just not merely talking. The academicians have what we call indicators which we use to measure. And I can just quickly, in the interest of time, say, for instance, we use life expectancy at birth, which measures the state of livelihood and situation. In the late 80s, early 90s, life expectancy at birth had fallen to 43 years. And yet at independence, it was about 60 years. That means when you give birth to a live child, how many years is that child expected to live? It had gone to 43. Now, in the last 30 years or so, it has shot up to 63.3. You check with the scholars any country which has been able to register that increase in a phenomenal short time. When you look at the mortality rates, like Mike was saying, infant mortality rate has fallen. It has dropped from over 120 deaths per 1,000 live births, the way we measure it, now to 36. Children who die under 5 years has reduced from over 300 now to 52. Maternal mortality, which is a measure of women who die because of pregnancy and childbirth, has dropped from over 700 at the beginning of NRM leadership, now to 189, according to the current figures. The population that lives below the poverty line, the proportion was 56% in the early 90s. Now it is at 20.3%. So everything is a positive trend. And at this rate, we are definitely poised for a brighter future. And therefore, the assurance we give the people out there is that as we speak with a lot of energy and enthusiasm as leaders of NRM, because we enjoy the benefits of ideological purity, because NRM as a party is grounded in a clear ideology, knowing what stands for and knowing what to do. And whatever we plan and implement as a party in the government is based on the 4 core principles which Honorable Chiwanda outlined. And therefore, going into the future, we shall continue to improve and consolidate service delivery with a focus on wealth creation, so that we can address the welfare of Ugandans, we address the quality of life. We would want all Ugandans, young people inclusive, to be part of production, to be part of the economy, so that all of us are wealthy and we fight for prosperity going into the future.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chris. Honorable Subi.
To me, everything has been put in place by the national resistance movement. Now the biggest challenge is on individuals. Because even the debt that actually some of our detractors talk about, the national debt, we, first of all, as a country, we've never reached the threshold. Because every country, they measure your GDP, and you at least are advised not to borrow beyond 50%. But even the 46% that we talk about where we are as a country, most of this money has been used to own social infrastructure. And the only, probably the only challenge that we could be having is the question that he asked. Yes, the infrastructure is there, but how people have made use of this infrastructure. Actually, we need to go out as a party to explain to the people, to differentiate between economic development and economic growth. Because in terms of the development, the national resistance movement has really moved. The word right Honorable Mukula was mentioning about the roads. You go here. I worked in Karamoja, and you would be on Maram. Even there was a time when even the whole of Tirinyi was Maram. Tirinyi to Mbale, then you move to Soroti, then you are moving this way. Then Muyembe to Nakapiripirit. But today, these roads have been done. The challenge is now, how do we now mobilize our population to make use of this? Because if you've not made use of this infrastructure, definitely the debts will come on our neck and we shall not be able to repay. Because what are the indicators? We must increase on our production. We must increase on our productivity. We must add value to increase on the profitability. So the 3 P's must be achieved: the production, the productivity, and profitability. And for our people to achieve that, then we need to do mobilization. We need to mobilize. You as NRM leaders, the only challenge actually we have as we enter the 38 years is to mobilize our population, make use of what is existing, the existing peace, the country, the stability which is existing here, the infrastructure that has been put in place, the rectification that has actually penetrated most of the villages. We must make use of this to improve on our well-being, to improve on our household income and add value. And finally, I think as we enter the 38 years, we must be actually at times when people say young people, yes, as young people we must show cause. We must be ready. We must, when our parents in Buganda, here, actually in Africa, when you give birth to a child, actually you want that child even to go beyond where you've stopped. That's why as we as fathers, as we actually get hold of our babies, we always do that and we demonstrate to them that actually we can do better. So as a young population now, what we need to do is to prove to those people above us that, yes, you've done this, but we can even do it better, not actually by dismissing them, by dismissing their achievements or what they've actually been able to do, but actually by copying from what they've done and see how we can take this country forward. To me, I see a very bright future for this country, and it's possible we can make it.
Thank you very much. Honorable Singh.
Thank you, Timothy. In the last 38 years, I am 56 today. I've lived all my life in Uganda. What Uganda was before 86 and after 86 is two different sides of the coin. Yes, we have a very educated, very energetic population. We need to make use of them. Our biggest challenge is corruption, which I think our president is fighting tooth and nail. Once people can have the nationalist interests and follow the ways of NRM, I think Uganda will be far ahead in the whole region. We have a bright future. People should support NRM and see that we can take this country. Like we said, we inherited a country which was bleeding. Today the country is at running. We want to fly.
Thank you very much. We're running, we want to fly. Lastly, Honorable Mike, how do we fly since the captain is with us?
Yeah, but I think as captain is coming in, you should also tell us about the celebrations, because he's the host vice chairperson.
Yes.
He's the host vice
That's very
chairperson.
true.
Exactly.
We are going to Eastern region. He should brief us how the celebration are going to be in Jinja.
He's going to fly us there.
Whether we should all come in yellow.
Oh, yes, he should tell us.
No, all
Is our
roads lead to Jinja on Friday.
Yeah.
And I want to say that Jinja will all be painted yellow.
Wow.
On Friday, as we receive the chairman and the commander-in-chief of our armed forces, and who is also the president of Uganda, the chairman of NAM, the non-aligned movement, the chairman of the G77, and you can go on and on. The National Resistance Movement, which is a revolutionary party under General Museveni, has been able to usher in 38 years of revolutionary changes, very effective changes, and it is the only grassroots party, which is a mass party. We have over 70 grassroots structures in terms of leadership. It is the only party in the country which has got the means and the capacity to mass mobilize to every village in Uganda. We have more villages than even what the Independent Electoral Commission has. The National Resistance Movement has got the means and capacity to address the challenges and the problems based on the core ideological values, the 4 core ideological values, which is patriotism, Pan-Africanism, social economic transformation, and democracy. Based on these fundamentals, the National Resistance Movement has got a clarity of leadership. It is the only movement, is the only political party in the country which has been able to hold this country together consistently without losing power. It's the only party which has been able to demystify the gun culture. It's the only political party in the country which has been able to address most of the social economic challenges this nation has faced. It's the only political party with a leadership which is tested, effective, and very resilient. It's the only political party under General Years Museveni which has been able to work consistently to bring about the consolidation of the East African community, which has now brought together countries like Tanzania, Kenya, Rwanda, Burundi, the DRC Congo, South Sudan, Somalia, and now Uganda. We have a historical mission, comrades. We have a historical mission as a revolutionary party to ensure that the African dream of bringing Africa together and demystifying these borders is achieved. The national resistance movement is following the ideals of our forefathers, Kwame Nkrumah, Nelson Mandela, people like Mwalimu Julius Nyerere, to ensure that the African solutions, African problems are solved or addressed by African solutions. We have a historical duty. Tuko na kazi vijana. I want to call upon the youth to dismember, disassociate themselves from the colonial norms and neocolonialism. The imperialists want to see Africa weak and divided. The national resistance movement under General Yoweri Kaguta Museveni has stood firm and hard to ensure that we resist but cooperate with the international bodies. I want therefore to call upon you to celebrate the 38 years of the national resistance movement. Yes, we have had challenges. No nation doesn't have challenges. Yes, we have had setbacks. No nation has grown without setbacks, but we have learned, we are better, and we think that from the lessons that we have learned, we will make this country much better, much stronger. The vision of the national resistance movement is to see that there is social economic transformation. I call upon you, the young people, to see that you don't let Africa down. Stand with the African continent, stand with the national resistance movement. And I want to assure you, our future is very bright, not only as Uganda, not only as East Africa, but Africa as a continent. May God Almighty continue to guide Africa and to hold Africa together. I thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentlemen, thank you very much. I appreciate that you've come through to discuss such patent issues, but they're also cognizant that with the achievements, there are a few challenges there, but they're telling us we're running and we're about to fly. With the captain speaking, I hope that's not part of his speech tomorrow, I mean Friday, but we're grateful that they're cognizant of the challenges and they're willing to do something about them. As a country, we need to pull ourselves together and do something about our country. We only have one Uganda, and we can only believe in it. So, there have been very many disappointments in the African Cup of Nations, so please watch the games tonight. Tonight at 8 p.m. we have Tunisia taking on South Africa. A lot of shocks happening there. Also at 11 we have Zambia taking on Morocco. Yesterday Algeria left, and also a big name, Ghana, left, and we saw Cameroon go through by the skin of their teeth. You need to watch what Ruben will be analyzing later on in there. At 10 p.m. we'll be having the news, so keep here and watch the news there. But also tomorrow, the president will be addressing us and telling us exactly what will be happening. From us to you, God bless you. Have a fabulous night.
The political anarchy that had characterized our journey since 1962. The NRM government has registered a lot of achievements in democratization, prosperity for all,